Turkey, Iran and Russia are due to meet in a few days to discuss the Syrian crisis. It comes as the Syrian regime is preparing an offensive on the last rebel stronghold of Idlib. The region is home to nearly 4 million people, mostly internally displaced. Where does the opposition stand in all of this? I sat down with the head of the High Negotiations Committee, Nasr al-Hariri, to find out. You have recently spoken to the Deputy Russian Foreign Minister. What was the conversation about?
Yes, I called the Deputy Russian Foreign Minister yesterday in the telephone here from Istanbul because of many reasons. The first is the importance and the sensitivity of the issue of Idlib. Second, the violation done by the Syrian regime in the south of Syria, detention, robbing, etc.
Well, the Russians say, and the regime says, it is preparing for an offensive against so-called terrorist groups, which they say includes HTS.
We know how the Syrian regime has used before the pretext of terrorism to target the areas which are under the control of the opposition. So he was saying in front of the world that I am fighting terrorism. But on the truth, on the ground, he was targeting civilians, hospitals, primary health care, etc.
Let's talk about Idlib itself. There are primarily two major factions there, pro-Turkish backed groups and groups that aren't aligned with Turkey. We've seen a lot of movement from Turkey to Russia. The defense minister, Kar, was there, the foreign minister was there, the intelligence chief was there. Is Turkey trying to convince the HTS and HTS fighters to leave this group and join more moderate rebel groups in Idlib?
This is the issue. I think that now the duty of the Turkish powers to continue convincing these armed groups, this HTS, and I think also it is the holy duty of the Syrian fighters in the HTS now to take the right decision and join the moderate armed groups in coordination with Turkey and leave terrorists and terrorism. Because in this case, they are used by the Russian and the regime to target civilians in Idlib and say in front of that.
So you think there is still a possibility that these fighters will leave HTS and join more moderate factions? And if this happens, can we expect a Russian assault, which is imminent, as you say, not to take place or stop?
Yes, I think now we have time and Turkey is still continuing to convince these fighters to leave. I think we have to use time as much as we can because the opposite is catastrophic. The opposite is to target 3 million people.
Yeah, but
and
the
you will
Russians
see, as the United Nations mentioned yesterday, you will see at least 800,000 of people displaced and located near the Syrian Turkish border, and we will see a huge wave of refugees if that happens.
The Russians are saying, the regime is saying they are ready, prepared any minute, any day now. They're prepared to start this offensive on Idlib. What needs to happen for this to stop or to avert this?
Now, as I mentioned, it's related to the HTS to coordinate and cooperate with Turkey to solve this problem. And we have to look at terrorism in a wide spectrum. What about tens of thousands of militias under the Revolutionary Guard which are fighting inside Syria? What about the systemic terrorism done by the Assad regime for about 7 years? Why don't we begin in the past to achieve the political solution and gather all the Syrian parties in one front against terrorism? But now the way the allies of the Syrian regime are fighting terrorism is referring to that the Russians are only want to support the Syrian regime. They are not trying to fight terrorism really.
If you look at the ground realities, the regime has taken almost
not
all
the regime, not the
areas
regime.
that were held.
Not the regime. The allies of the regime admitted.
The regime with the help of Iran
yes,
and
yes,
Russia.
yes. The regime's ally admitted that the moment we leave the regime, the opposition will retake these areas in 3 months only. So the final solution is the logic political solution. In that way, no solution will happen and be achieved in Syria.